the Mediterranean fishing village it was supposed to be.
But it was still a pretty remarkable place, and it was a city on a hill. It was a very English conception of what a university is all about.
Mediterranean village. But instead of fishing fish, you fish knowledge, essentially.
And maybe it appears that we're not completely organized, but that's because the organization's hidden. So we're happy to be here, and this is the first time, to my knowledge, in 40 years of the history of our association that we're going to hear from students. We used to meet at Cal, but we never had a program by Cal. So this is interesting. I'd like to welcome Charlie McDowell. This is his first luncheon, and he joined this year. Miriam Landisman, who joined this year, and it's her first luncheon. John Jordan, it's his first luncheon. And Norman Locks joined this year. I think Eli Hollander also joined this year. So our membership is, I don't know, it's a moving number, but I think it's 167 now, regular members, and 23 associate members. I'd like to specifically mention and welcome Hal Hyde. He comes often, but what you don't know is he's celebrating his 96th birthday in May. He retired in 1975, and when I set up the database of all Emeriti from UCSC starting in 1965, I sorted by date of retirement, and I numbered them starting with 1. And Hal Hyde's number is number 6. So this is like a startup company, you know. People take pride in the lower number. So Hal is the lowest number of any member current. And if you're interested what your number is, for a price I can tell you. So we have a jam-packed program today, and we're anxious to hear the students. I hope you got to talk to the one at your table, and I hope there were enough to go around for each table. That may be the most important part of the program, is to get to know a student personally. Because some of us are not teaching any longer and not seeing students on a regular basis. So I have one announcement. I'd like to call on Linda Berman Hall to disclose a new, exciting development. Linda, are you here? She's coming. And it's about a new way to present your research.
Hi there. I spoke to many of you in 2017 to say that a new radio for the community was trying to start up, and now I'm here to say that we have been greatly successful, and we will be on 90.7 FM. Some of you know that we're already broadcasting, and this is actually a 9-hour tape loop, not from the studio. This is the radio that is KSQD, K-Squid, and well, it's a wonderful name, and it's under auspices of Natural Bridges Media, of which I'm the secretary and have been since we formed our board, and we eventually incorporated, and we managed to raise $265,000 from the local community to purchase that frequency. We are delighted that we will be officially fully on air in about a week on the 15th of February, and it's important that you consider to listen to us when we are with our full menu of shows. There will be a notice with great detail in the newsletter coming right out after the weekend. Todd mentions that it's almost ready to go, and we know John Schechter is the editor, so it will be efficient as ever. I want to say that what's important is that there is a Sunday night show that I turn out to be the default host of, and we're looking for two things. First of all, co-hosts who are outside the arts. Right now, I can handle interviews in the arts for this weekly half-an-hour show. It's meant to have new work from people all over this campus who are doing research that will have a face that is available to the public, whether it's a gallery opening or a book that's just come out with a book signing, whether it's a public lecture, whether it's some other kind of performance event, you name it, something that will be of wide appeal to the listenership. The listenership, by the way, of K-Squid will be all of Santa Cruz and North County and most of South County, and we will be stretching out with translators as we're able in future. So that's the first thing, just to know that this exists and to consider if you could help me in the humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, maybe engineering, to be a co-host rotating to ferret out the appropriate events and interview. About a 1 hour of interview would boil down to maybe 26, 27 minutes of show in the editing booth. The second thing is when you're the person who is doing this research and it's your time that you're about to be doing your public lecture or your public event, consider to let us know. We won't be able to do everything on the team that's forming now, but we will want to have Emeriti fairly represented among campus researchers. I think it's important that all the research that's being done with Emeriti as well as the unretired faculty be appropriately represented. So this is KSQD.
Thank you.
Watch for it.
There will be, it will be recorded, and there will be podcasts. So another way to think about this from the Emeriti standpoint is it can be the audio of a newsletter, another way to reach out. So I think now, Manel, I'd like to invite him to take over and be the MC, say any words that he wants about Crown and what we're going to hear, and introduce the participants.
Thank you, Don, and thank you all for coming. We're very excited to have you. Because the way that I see it, when I started as provost 5 years ago, I come from the Department of Microbiology, and when I saw what the college was about, my eyes just opened, and I totally embraced it. So what does it mean? So it means that the college is a community for our students, and that really should be not just the teachers and the staff, but also the alumni, one of which is here, Lisa Rose. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having
And
me.
they've been a wonderful, and Signa as well. Thank you for coming. And what's your name? Margaret, so Margaret, Signa, and Lisa Rose are here. And we started working with alumni very tightly about 3 years ago for the 50th anniversary, and we didn't look back. So now I want to really bring faculty in America and connect them with the college. The second idea is that the college is where we cultivate basic academic skills. So we work hard on core. So core now is about critical thinking and analytical reading, and it has a research project, one of which you're going to see today. And also I've worked on the curriculum for basic academic skills that's initially taught through our honors program, and sometimes then it's also taught in summer so that all students can actually take it. So this involves classes in videography, in entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, two of which you're going to see today, and theater, because I really like to emphasize collaboration, and theater is collaborative by design. So I think it's a great experience for our students, regardless of their major. So I'd also like to thank Marina, the college academic programs coordinator, who did most of the logistics for this event. Thank you so much, Marina.
You don't have to worry about
She put together a gift bag for you, so please take it when you leave. It's on the table. It's a blue bag. And now I'm going to introduce the program. So we're going to start with a 1-minute trailer for a play that was read in core, and that a group of our students are actually performing under the direction of Abel Cornejo, who's here in the audience. So this is going to be performed 2 days, on February 22nd and February 23rd. February 22nd is going to be here, and the 23rd is going to be at the Allen Arts Center, downtown. Thank you. And then Marilyn Patton is one of our core lecturers. She's going to talk about a pilot that she started this year, incorporating alumni into the classroom. And then we're going to hear 3 student presentations, one called Green Spell from our social entrepreneurship class, another one called Kazoom from our Startup Academy, so regular entrepreneurship class, and the final one is going to be a presentation about the ethics of emerging technologies in the criminal justice system that comes from CORE. So without any further ado, we're going to start with a movie trailer. Thank you.
Sky beyond the blue, beyond the wisps of clouds. So far below, the problems are left behind.
She isn't a person. She's a robot.
Robots don't need anything. Robots don't have feelings, no will of their own, no hopes, no soul.
You're throwing human workers out to the streets.
There, you see. Robots don't cling to life.
I am a robot. If I'm free, do I get what I want in life?
Don't you even feel sorry for them?
If we let them go, it will create chaos.
But it's all over now.
Everything's over now. They're robots. They're all robots.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Patton, and we all read R.U.R. During fall quarter, so the students are very prepared and excited about having this opportunity to see it, because we kind of studied it and thought about it during fall. I'm teaching a class now where we're going to do part of a play by Gao Xingzhan in my class called The Other Shore. So I love using theater, even though we're doing science in the classes. So I want you to know that there is a handout connected to what I'm saying, and that's inside of the bags. And so I'll be mentioning that. So, okay. So I want to thank Manel and Marina, too, because they have been so wonderful in taking up almost every suggestion for doing something new and exciting here at Crown. And when we want to do something with the core course, they're leading the way. So one of the exciting initiatives that Dr. Camps undertook this year was to involve some interested alumni in the brand new college core course, which was started at all 10 colleges as a new way this year. We restricted this experiment just to Crown alumni since it was our first year, but I'm going to tell you about it. So Dr. Jim Lapsley, class of 1971, and those of you who've been around know that was an early class, I think it was the first four-year class, was key to setting up the ideas for this innovation and to getting alumni involved. My classes were the first to involve alumni, and so I made the online discussions a significant part of the class. Alumni were expected to do most of the reading for the whole core course, and they, along with the students, and then first to introduce themselves, and that's part of what's in the packet. You'll get some of the alumni introductions, and you can see that quite a few of them were in the medical field, some of them still working, so they were trying to do all this reading and keeping up their jobs and everything. And then to contribute their opinions from each of the 10 discussion questions. So we expected them to keep up. Sometimes that didn't all happen. So we were experimenting with the form of the discussions at the same time that we were pioneering a new type of core course. So pretty exciting stuff. Of course, the discussions in class were as exciting as those online, but there was real positive value in requiring all students to participate online because all the voices were given equal status, whereas sometimes in class, the shyer students hang back and don't get heard as well as the experienced and more sophisticated students. I had one student whose parents both worked for the World Bank, and he would mention all the famous people, including Beyonce, that he had knew, so that was a little intimidating. So what about the alumni? The alumni ideas made the students sit up and take notice. They couldn't believe it when Jim Lapsley wrote something like 2 full pages about his reaction to Frankenstein. Jim's idea was not to treat the alumni as particularly different, but just as quote-unquote students of a certain age, along with the regular students. The result in many cases was to have some truly interesting ideas thrown into the mix, and this challenged and intrigued the students living here on campus. Another of our ideas was to ask the alumni to serve as mentors for the groups of students who did a quarter-long research project and presentation and paper, and all through the quarter, and to be sounding boards for ideas and possibly to give feedback on the papers. That was difficult this time around, but I can see how to make it work next time, so we're looking toward that. And now, here's what I'm asking for you. As emeritus professors, you may be interested to hear that there were students who really needed to interview because, people with knowledge in their field, and the professors who are busy teaching the classes sometimes say, oh, I can't take on one more thing. But maybe, I don't know if you have time, but it would be great if you could. So some of my students, for example, interviewed Dr. Peter Scott about the special theory of relativity, and they were working on they were following Kuhn and doing different kinds of ideas about science, and they also used the work of Frank Drake on the SETI project. So if any of you would be willing to be interviewees for my students next year or for other classes' students, we would really, really appreciate that. And I'd love to hear from you. I'm M.A. Patton at UCSC. Okay, in case you want to do that. Okay, I believe that this kind of interview, which is primary research, motivates the students in ways that secondary research does not do. And so they get so excited when they can actually talk to somebody. And they interviewed Dr. Camps too, I have to tell you, and they loved doing that. And then they would put up these people, when they were doing their presentations, they put up pictures of Dr. Peter Scott and Dr. Camps, and they were just so excited to know real researchers. Finally, let me tell you about a few of the items in your gift bag. We included several of the introductions from the alumni, and then after that, you will see responses to reading Frankenstein. The first one is interesting because Yvonne Marie Rauch requests students to give their own versions of pride in one's specialized knowledge. And so she asked the students to do that, and then one of my students responded to that with a story from her background, which is Pakistani. And so you get a story from Pakistan in kind of paralleling the story, the Frankenstein story, and Yvonne Marie Rauch's story. And then you also may enjoy at the back of the little packet a piece of flash fiction. And Dr. Camps, I think he comes up with a new idea practically every week. But so Tim Fitzmaurice thought of this, and Dr. Camps went along with it, which is that we had a flash fiction contest. There's two ones, a 250-word contest and a 750-word contest, and they haven't been judged yet, as far as I know, this year. But you get the prize winners from last year, and then I included one of the ones that was done just on the online discussion in my class, and I got quite a few of these. One of the discussion questions was choose a write or choose, and they were reading The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin, and they had to either tell whether they would leave or not leave Omelas. And you may know that story. If not, I can tell it to you in about 5 minutes. Or they had to write flash fiction. And I got some wonderful entries, and I think you will be interested to see what happens in the estrangement effect and other things in a very, very short piece of flash fiction by just one student. So that's by Eric Long, and he gave me permission to let you see it. And you can see Eric including current issues in the writing. And also in the gift bag, you're also going to get all the good flash fiction that won from last year's students, winners in the science fiction contest. So I hope you will take a look at those, and hope you enjoy that. And anyway, so I would love to hear from you if you would like to be interviewees for next year's students, because that is really a wonderful thing for them. And whatever your field of expertise is, I think it's helpful for them to be talking to people who are really important, know their stuff, and can help guide them. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Max Mann is going to present Greenspell.
Thank you, Manel. So my name is Max, and I am going to be presenting to you a project that I worked on in a social entrepreneurship class through Crown College. I'm going to start by showing you a video, then I'm going to give you a brief presentation, followed up with a quick story, and then I'll wrap it up. So this is a quick video introducing you to the idea of Greenspell.
I'm Vega Dugada,
And I'm Max.
and together we've developed Greenspell.
Greenspell is simple, and it comes in two parts.
The first is a model where we partner with farms to sell boxes of locally grown organic produce. A Greenspell box contains a recipe with prepared ingredients that are easily combined to make delicious and nutritious meals.
Profits from sales are reinvested into a second, complementary model designed to pick up excess food from local businesses and distribute it to those facing food insecurity. This model allows companies to benefit both social and environmental ends through cost-effective means. We've tested these models through conversations, both with potential partners and our various customer segments.
Here are 4 things we learned that inform our approach going forward. Number 1. Nature packages itself. The leading companies selling meal kits don't have an issue with profitability, but they do have an issue of wasteful packaging. Minimal packaging is key.
Number 2. Santa Cruz is a progressive place, but it boasts some of the worst poverty rates in the country. Our mission centers around the triple bottom line and seeing these numbers change.
Number 3, companies act morally when they're incentivized to. When we prove to firms that donating food cuts down on waste management costs, they're more likely to donate based on their own profit motive.
Number 4, taking time to focus on the big picture is a luxury. To show that this model is viable, the next step is to begin operations in Santa Cruz and slowly grow outward.
Greenspell seeks to address 2 of the largest threats to welfare, wealth inequality and the global threat of climate inaction.
And if it's successful, everyone wins. Consumers have easier access to nutritious meal kits, local food waste is minimized, and businesses conveniently give back to their community through social and environmental benefit. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to transition into giving a quick presentation based on what you saw in the video. So Greenspell is a subscription-based food rescue service and a local meal kit provider. We work with chefs, farms, and families to curate and deliver local meal kits. And in addition, we also operate a subscription-based service that rescues food from local businesses and delivers it to those facing food insecurity. So to get into the motive behind Greenspell, we want to offer a local meal kit alternative in order to reduce our carbon footprint, to address food insecurity in Santa Cruz County, to increase social mobility, and to introduce people to locally grown produce while building bridges between businesses and those in need. So through this process, I gave 30 interviews, 25 of which were in person, and these essentially consisted of a pitch and then the conversation that unfolded from there. What I learned from these interviews are that our customers, or our prospective customers, are forward-thinking, they're diverse, they're cost-sensitive, they tend to be health-conscious and environmentally conscious. Not at all one size fits all, but they're open to tech, and maybe above all, they value transparency. This is just a quick visual description of some of the people that I talked to through this process. And one of the things that I found is that in order to please many people, I had to give up pleasing all people. We had to make, even just thinking through this idea theoretically, we had to make certain compromises. For example, in order for Greenspell to price competitively in the same market as a corporation such as Sunbasket, we would have to compromise environmental standards, which is something that from the get-go we decided we weren't willing to do. Another one of the most persistent obstacles I faced, and I may be facing this currently in front of you all, is using explicit enough language to share this vision with others. So one of the most embarrassing things is trying to explain to somebody what you're trying to do and then just seeing a blank face, or realizing that they really don't understand what exactly you're wanting to do. So this gives you Greenspell's annual income projections, and this is based on market data and census data. So there's a for-profit side of this, and that is the meal kit component. And the annual income projection for that is over $2 million, which would then be reinvested in the food rescue service. And businesses would pay subscription fees to have food rescued, and that would come in at just around $250,000. So obviously, this is all theoretical, but it gives you a sense, based on market data, of what a company like this could do. So this is very wordy, but I highlighted a couple of curious findings, and I'll go over this one right here. So I didn't know what a food rescue service was before this. but it turns out that there are companies, I don't know if any are actively working in Santa Cruz County, but there are companies like Replay in the East Bay that are environmental nonprofits, and tech companies, like a Facebook or Apple, or even UC Santa Cruz. Following an event like this, there's likely leftover food that could be picked up by a service like Greenspell and taken to a local food bank. So that's sort of the idea behind this project. So I am now going to segue into a quick story to wrap up this presentation. And this is something that happened to me earlier this week, so it seems very topical. This is a picture of my bike, my beloved bike. I ride up to campus from the west side almost every morning, and this last week was week 5, so a very, a busy week in terms of the quarter system, midterm season, peak productivity. And on Tuesday morning, I get out of bed, I go outside, and my bike is gone. Yeah, so my bike was stolen. And if you remember, Monday night was incredibly stormy. So I believe that somebody was out, wandering desperately, looking for, some way to make some money. So my bike was gone. I rode the bus. This is later that day. Posts on social media as I was sort of furiously trying to pool my resources and trying to figure out how I would get this bike back. So there's an Instagram post, there's a Facebook post, and all of these sort of numbers that I'm scratching down while on the phone with cops and in touch with the police department. This story leads me to Tent City, which, if you're not familiar, is currently behind the Ross Dress for Less, just off of Highway 1. And so after class on Wednesday, I went there, and one of the first things I saw was a man riding my bike. I didn't know what to do. I decided against confronting him. So instead, I got on the phone with the cops, described them to him, and for the remainder of the afternoon, maybe 5 or 6 hours, I frantically ran around and drove around and rode a jump bike looking for this man. To no avail. But a few things I was able to gather. The man who stole my bike did not steal it for pleasure. And I decided, while going through this, as I was roaming around Santa Cruz and seeing, people displaced or in really tough situations, that I wasn't going to let my perception of this one person inform my perception of the whole. And that possibly, the more often their needs are met, the better off they are to meet their own needs. So, this brings us to Thursday. On Facebook, I had said that I would give up a reward in return for anyone who's able to track down my bike. And I went, with the help of the Santa Cruz Police Department, into Tent City yesterday with an escort, and I walked all the way to the back. I found my bike under a blanket, was able to get it back. Luckily, the person who stole it was sleeping. And so I got my bike back, which was nothing short of a miracle. But I had this money that was lying around, and it's been incredibly cold. I've been just thinking of these people nonstop, and even though I feel in some ways violated by them, I also feel a great sense of empathy towards them. So this morning, with the help of my friend Caroline, we went to the Ross and we bought a bunch of dry socks and went back into Tent City to hand them out. So to loop back to Greenspell, I believe that this is a viable, Greenspell has a viable future, partially because businesses that have this sort of messaging and this sort of a mission, we need them. There are people on the streets as we speak who rely on nonprofits, local nonprofits and successful local nonprofits. And similar models are thriving, like the company that I mentioned, Replay. So while I'm not currently planning to pursue this idea, I want to look into more ways in which I can give back to our community, especially through addressing the social inequality and the issues that surround that. So I'd be interested in hearing from you. This is a very interesting group. I feel honored to speak in front of you today. So let's meet for coffee. Here is my information. If anybody's interested, I'm very much open to getting together and chatting. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Max, for that wonderful presentation. So now we're going to see a very different presentation from the class that's for-profit. And they're going to show how our students are incorporating new technologies into their ideas for enterprises.
Oh, it did not show up well. All right. I think we're just going to project because mics are hard.
Yeah. Oh, actually.
All right. So we started with a problem, right?
I am.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about advertisements, right? So online retail, right, they have it down to a science. You can see your entire customer's journey, right, from view to click to buy, the entire app.
And because of this, small businesses are struggling against online retailers like Amazon, right? It's harder for them to exactly see how many people are coming into their store versus like an online shop. So we're trying to solve this through better physical advertisement. So what we're doing is we're trying to combine the cost, availability, and metrics, so like real-world data of online ads, to the physical world for small business.
Could you use the microphone, please?
Okay, yes.
And then on the other side, we have the issue of car ownership for like college students, right? Owning a car is pretty expensive. You have, if you just have a car in Santa Cruz, you have, your loans, your leasing, possibly maintenance, definitely gas every day.
And so the solution to this is Kazoom. What we do is we pay drivers a small monthly stipend to advertise on their car for a small business. And we collect data from that ad to help the small business know how their business is working.
So this is almost all of Kazoom's team. I'm Mason. That's Alan and Josh. Unfortunately, Bobby couldn't be here. He kind of got sick, and yeah. So what is Kazoom? So in a nutshell, really compressed version, Kazoom is a startup specializing in automobile advertising and metric analytics to support small business.
So what our technology does is it measures the viewability and customer conversion of physical ads. So basically, you see a billboard driving the Highway 17. What our technology can tell you is exactly how many people have seen that ad and how many of them have gone into a store because of that ad. And because we're using really low-cost devices and we're providing real-world data, we're hoping that these ads make small businesses competitive with Amazon.
So here's just a small example of what an advertisement on a car would look like. We've worked with David Dennis, who is the owner and founder of Autonomous Surfboards, so he allowed us to use his logo for an example.
Okay, so way back in the beginning, our first step was to conduct some interviews and test and gauge our idea. So we first talked to potential drivers to see whether they were in on the idea, and we asked questions like, would you consider putting an ad on your car? And for the most part, we found that the answer was yes. They were okay with putting an ad on their car if we respected their values, their privacy, and gave them something for their time. That wasn't really the problem. We then talked to our customers, potential businesses, and we asked them, why do you advertise the way that you do? And we found that really they were just trying to minimize their costs and their time and maximize the results from their advertising. So after conducting these interviews and fleshing out our idea, we came up with some technology that addressed some of the issues that the businesses were facing. Basically, we have this technology that through collecting like phone data, we can sort of get a sense of who sees the ad as the car drives by, and then we collect the same data when they walk in the store. Essentially, we corroborate people who see the ad on the street, people who walk into the ad in the store, and that gives us some really useful metrics that we think businesses would really appreciate. It would tell them a lot about how the ads are doing and the effectiveness and so on.
And so that basically works through, because your phone is always sending out radio signals, right, Wi-Fi probes. By collecting that data, we can see approximately who's in the area of an ad.
And all of that data, if you think of it, a good analogy that we heard was you think of it like a face, right? It's the same as if you were walking down the street and somebody saw you looking at an ad and just manually counted you. So the data we're collecting is completely non-intrusive, and there's no privacy issues with it at all. So, financials of our business. So there's 3,748,886 small businesses in the U.S. that fit our exact customer archetype. So that means a business like, we found that there's kind of two kinds of businesses. There's businesses that have customers that walk into the store with an intention, and businesses that want to attract customers to come to them over their competitors. So an example of this would be like an auto parts store, right? You don't go to an auto parts store to really peruse the nuts and bolts. More of you're going to the auto parts store because you need new windshield wipers right now. As compared to like a restaurant, right? What makes you go to, Betty's Burgers over Burger Dome, right? They need to make sure that they're getting your business rather than their competitors. And so when we kind of broke it down with all of the drivers and the businesses, so the costs of setup with the devices and with the ads, and then paying drivers, we still were able to make a profit, a net profit. And then assuming a 5% penetration rate, meaning we only get 5% of the businesses in the area. This is in Santa Cruz, and then this is as we expand nationally, and so this is kind of a really quick breakdown of how the business works. So a driver signs up with Kazoo through the app, and they take a values quiz. And what this values quiz does is it matches them with a business that has similar values. So that would be like you would put an ad for coal on a Prius, or vice versa, right? Because it just doesn't make sense. So we match their values, and they get shipped all of their decals and the devices. And then on the flip side, a small business registers with us. They also take a values quiz, so that we're able to match them with an accurate driver. And then through a branding expert, we help optimize their advertising for a car setting. And then they also get the same device in their store so that we're able to match. Both that data goes into the servers. We have some algorithms that we've written that do some analytics, and then everybody gets the data that they want. And yeah.
And so here are some competitors. As you can see, advertising is between digital media and physical media. We're very far in the physical media side, and we're more oriented towards small business advertisements versus advertisements for large corporations. And so moving forward, right now we're trying to run an experiment with Shop Surf over on SoCal. It's a new surf shop. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pay a couple of our friends to drive around with ads. And they're going to log all the data, and we're going to see if the numbers come out to something that's worth doing. And then if that works out, we're going to keep going. We're going to build an app. We're going to hopefully launch in Santa Cruz. And so
what we had to, or what we need to spend money on is, we need money for the initial experiments. We need Raspberry Pis, the decals, the incidental costs, like starting a business, incorporating. And then after that, it's going to take some money, some time for actually creating the app. And after that, it's really, that's when we start coming up to scale. We have to spend even more money on the initial stuff like Raspberry Pis, but at just a greater level.
Yeah, so thank you for having us. We really appreciate it, and it's really an honor to speak in front of you.
What is Raspberry Pi?
Oh, yes. So the Raspberry Pi is the device that we're using. So a Raspberry Pi is basically a very, very, very simple computer chip. So you can basically run commands on it, and you can attach components. Yes.
I have a minor comment about presentation.
Yes.
Which is, don't put a yellow background.
Yes. Yeah. So.
Get rid of pastel colors. Otherwise, I'm sure that most people here, as Mike has indicated, I couldn't read a single word, and there were some arrows, and I think they had words.
Yes.
No, honestly,
So, on my computer, the contrast was a lot better. So that was kind of a surprise for us too.
Yeah.
But you live and you learn, I guess.
It's good learning.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you guys have any questions or comments, we'd be happy to answer them now. If you think of anything afterwards, you can reach us at kazoomarketing@gmail.com or on Facebook.
Calling in the back.
There.
I think you're being very realistic when you said only you expect 5% of doing that. That's very, very realistic. I would expect you would have said 10%.
Well, thank you.
I really am not sure how you know how many people have seen it. I don't understand how you correlate that with people who go into the store. How do you know that somebody who drives by in a car is the same person who walks into the store?
So it's based on your phone. So what we're assuming is that for every one phone, there's one person. And so while there's no way to tell, like, if somebody has actually seen something. Like, I could be facing this way but not reading anything. So what we're assuming is that if someone is within the area of an ad for a while, they've probably at least, glanced at it. And because their phone is it's constantly sending out signals. Your phone has a unique Wi-Fi address called a MAC address. So whenever your phone is sending out Wi-Fi signals, it's sending out this unique code of numbers out to everything around you. So right now, all of your phones are transmitting your MAC addresses everywhere in this room through radio signals.
And you're keeping track of everybody's cell phones in Santa Cruz?
So it's not keeping track of cell phones, it's keeping track of an identifier. So we don't know literally anything else about the cell phone besides the fact that it was there. And then next time one of our devices pings the phone, then we know it was there. And so it's really just matching numbers. And to make it even more secure, we hash it, which kind of means we encode it, so that only we really know what the number is.
And so you can't actually do anything with this number. Like it's a MAC address, it's a number, right? So, but it doesn't say anything about you. It doesn't say what your name is, who you are, where you've been before. All we're trying to do is get a one-to-one connection that you were near the ad and then in a store.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but it's disturbing to me.
There's no way to find out the phone number from the MAC number.
No, absolutely not. No, I mean, really all the information we have is that the phone exists.
It's not so different from like digital ads right now, because when you click on an ad, they know that someone has seen the ad and of course has clicked on it. So it's sort of like the same equivalency in the physical realm.
Yeah, online advertising is a little bit scarier.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Now you see why we're known as the Techie College. And it's also a perfect segue for the last presentation, because as you see, when you start implementing technology, you raise all kinds of ethical questions. And this is what we're exploring in core. And the next group is going to explore the ethical implications of technology in the criminal justice system. So something that is very applicable. So,
There's a clicker for the slides. Okay.
Testing. Good afternoon, everybody. We are the group that's going to be presenting ethics of emerging technologies in the criminal justice system. We, like Manel said, are from the Crown Core course, so we are happy to be presenting this to you today. My name is Daria. This is Anthony, Lauren, and Johnny. Okay, so the way that we're going to organize this presentation to you today is in 3 different levels. So the first level that we're going to explore is the law enforcement level, so our police, and then forensic level is our second level, so this will be things like DNA analysis, and then our third level is the judicial level.
Alright, so the first thing I would like to talk about for a second is how our Constitution is basically built. And it was built as a living document. So instead of going into the specifics, our founding fathers rather just tried to embody the spirit of what they wanted to happen. And the reason this has been so effective is because it's allowed it to stay relevant, even though our culture and the technology and everything has changed rapidly since the US was founded. And so today, most of what we're talking about is pertaining to the Fourth Amendment. And that is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons and things to be seized. And what most of it comes down to in a lot of the Supreme Court cases is whether people have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and that's what a lot of the rulings are based on. Okay, so I'll be talking about the law enforcement level. So the first thing I want to talk about is thermal imaging. And when it first came out, it was used by the Force Department to basically obtain a warrant for a drug bust. And what was happening was there were people growing marijuana plants in a garage, and it was giving off a lot of heat due to the heat lamps. And so they saw that it was giving off more like standard deviations above normal amounts of heat. And they used that to obtain a warrant. And when it was brought to the Supreme Court ruled it as unconstitutional. And this was because they said that thermal imaging was not something that the public had standard access to at that time. And because of that, it had a reasonable expectation of privacy that people were not going to be looking at their house with thermal imaging equipment. Something that's a little bit more controversial recently is drones and the police, and basically drone photography being used to get warrants. And a while ago, before the emergence of drones as a prominent technology, there was a Supreme Court case, California v. R.U.R. And what happened with that was the police department used aerial photography from an airplane to obtain a warrant to go and do a drug bust due to what they saw in someone's backyard. And when this was brought in front of the Supreme Court, it was ruled as constitutional. And the reason that they said this was because they said that the airspace was a public domain. And since then, drones have emerged into the spotlight and are now a mainstream thing. And so, because of that, there was a decision made, I think it was 20 years ago, around 20 years ago. And since then, the technology has changed rapidly. And so we're starting to see how, basically, as times change, our government is always playing catch up.
I will be going over the forensics level. Now, forensics can cover anything from fiber analysis to ballistics, but today I will be talking about DNA profiling and DNA databases. Now, when an analyst receives a sample of DNA from a crime scene, what they will do is perform what's called an Eastern blot test, which will separate the DNA into segments such as what is seen here. Now, in this example, it's fairly easy to figure out who the perpetrator is, seeing as the first band from the crime scene only matches one of the suspects, suspect 2. And as you can see, all the subsequent banding is identical. However, this is a very unrealistic model. Oftentimes, when a sample comes in from a crime scene, it can contain 2, 3, even 4 DNA profiles, which means an Eastern blot test isn't necessarily conclusive. This creates a lot of issues in analyzing the data. And with the issues, there also comes a lot of misrepresentation in court, because people who are jurors often see DNA evidence as infallible. This has caused a lot of people to be wrongfully convicted, even though there was reasonable doubt within the scientific community about the data itself. However, there is a good side to this. Often, since the advent of DNA profiling, more technology and knowledge has been put into this science, which has developed it further. As such, many people who were wrongfully convicted before the advent of this technology have been exonerated because they have been retried with new evidence. However,
Can you go back to the slide?
Sure.
So doesn't the crime scene and suspect 2 are 1-to-1? Yes.
Yes, that's what she said.
Is that correct?
yes, because in this example, when you're looking at the banding from the crime scene and you want to compare it against your suspects, you want it to have identical banding, because that means that the Eastern blot test shows that the DNA is exactly a match. And so in this example, it is easy to figure out that the suspect 2 is the perpetrator. As far as DNA databases are concerned, there are a lot of issues and controversy. For example, there are no federal laws prohibiting the sale of DNA profiles to interested parties or companies, which means if you go into a police investigation and they want you to give a sample of your DNA in order to prove your innocence, and you willingly do so, they don't have to destroy your sample because you gave it willingly or because you were innocent. They could upload that to their database. And from there, that file can be sold to a company. Now, this is where it gets really tricky. If it was sold to an insurance company, and that insurance company looked at your DNA and saw you had markers for early onset Alzheimer's, for example, that insurance company can refuse you service based on a pre-existing condition. This is known as biases on genetics, and there are laws protecting people against this. However, it is very difficult to enforce them. So although it's a good first step, it's not a holistic solution to the situation. Additionally, scholars have noted that DNA databases are difficult and expensive to maintain and only really applicable to certain crimes, which has led a lot of people to determine that these databases are a violation of people's First Amendment rights on the very fundamental aspect of their person, their genetic code.
All right, so I will be dealing with the judicial level of emerging technologies in our criminal justice system. And as Anthony said earlier, our legal system is always, and our law enforcement system is always playing catch up when it comes to new technologies. And the perhaps most recent example of this is what we've been dealing with cell phone records. Can you go to the next slide? And with historic cell site data. Now, if anyone is an avid watcher of Dateline, you will know that phones, when you use your phone, they connect to cell towers, which then, connect to satellites and things like that, and that's how you get cell service. And these cell towers have locations, and there is you could hypothetically, to pull up these information, have a list of all the cell towers that you connected to recently, showing your exact location. And as of a few months ago and before this, it was perfectly legal for the police to look at all of your cell site data without a warrant due to the third-party doctrine. And this doctrine holds that if you voluntarily give information to third parties, you have no reasonable expectation of privacy. And this was established by United States v. Miller in 1976, which held that written bank records were accessible without warrants, and also by Smith v. Maryland in 1979, which talked about recording phone, like which phone number you called in a payphone. And it's very alarming to see, as these court cases were heard in the 1970s, before cell phones even existed. And so up until recently, though, the historic cell site data issue wasn't much of a problem, as cell phones were still very new and didn't affect people very much. Next slide. But then this changed when over 95% of Americans had smartphones, making it so that pretty much anyone's location at any given time could be seen by the police. And as the lovely Kazoom presenters explained, this isn't very much different than, somebody, seeing your face and noting, your location. But however, if the police were to look at your location for, a given period of time, there's a question of, did the police have motive to do so? Would the police have, any reasonable explanation to why they would know or need to know where somebody was for, let's say, a week? Next slide, please. Which did excuse me. This leads us to U.S. v. Carpenter, which was actually heard just this last summer. And this then changed the interpretation of the third-party doctrine and made it so that historic cell site data does need a warrant to be used by the police.
Okay.
Oh, here, you.
This is good. Okay. So throughout this presentation, we talked about the implications of these technologies in our criminal justice system. And the more that we talk about them, the more that people like me wonder, how real is all of this? How much of it can actually be applied to us? So to bring things into perspective to all of you, I wanted to bring in the example of China's surveillance. So I've attached a short clip here about it. Click it. There's sound.
This is the next groundbreaking development in data-driven technology, facial recognition. And in China, you can already withdraw cash, ticket at airports, and pay for goods using just your face. The country is the world's leader in the use of this emerging technology. And China's many artificial intelligence startups are determined to keep it that way in the future. Companies like U.R.
We are pioneering artificial intelligence research and innovation in the hope of creating a safer, faster, and healthier world.
U.R. is creating the building blocks for a smart city of the future, where facial recognition is part of everyday life. This could even extend to detecting what people are thinking.
Facial recognition, they can read people's emotions, and we are actually now working on these innovative demonstrations and technology.
But the Chinese government has plans to use this new biometric technology to cement its authoritarian rule. The country has ambitious plans to develop a vast national surveillance system based on facial recognition. It'll be used to monitor its 1.4 billion citizens in unprecedented ways, with the capability of tracking everything from their emotions to their sexuality. The primary means will be a vast network of CCTV cameras. 170 million are already in place, and an estimated 400 million new ones will be installed over the next 3 years. The authorities insist this program will allow them to improve security for citizens. And if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. But not every...
Okay, so the video talks about a couple interesting things. It mentions that with this facial recognition technology, we can buy things, we can get into our homes and other pretty convenient applications. And this seems to be the purpose of technology, to raise our standard of living. However, the video also talks about how this technology can read our emotions and is moving into things like human sexuality. And I don't know about you, but that worries me a little bit. What is someone doing with this data? With knowing their citizens' sexuality, what importance is that to them? This is data that otherwise would be irrelevant. And while I'm not exactly sure what they can do with this data, we do know that the Chinese government is planning to implement more of this technology into their government, claiming that it will be safer and protect people even more. Yet, so if this is implemented into their society, what's stopping it from being implemented into our own? From the examples that we've shown you today, as well as other cases, there seems to be some gray area. And while police may not be able to use thermal imaging technology to monitor us, they can use aerial imaging technology to take pictures of the public's property at will. And this type of technology may be useful and accurate, but we also saw that it can lead to unreliable DNA results that will lead to wrongful convictions. However, let's not lose all of our hope just yet, because we saw in the United States Supreme Court case, United States v. Carpenter, that there is hope because the government is catching up to protecting some of our cell site data. Now, what does this mean for us? What can we even do? What are we going to do? Well, I think that the most important thing is for us to be knowledgeable about these cases that are going on and the cases that have been going on. And it's our duty to ourselves and our society to know what technologies are available to us, but also to law enforcement. And it is our greatest duty, I think, especially as Americans, for us to be able to exercise our rights and know our rights, like that of the almighty Fourth Amendment, so that we can start to diminish some of this gray area that comes with this ethics, with this emerging technology. Thank you.
Head off the stage, just let us know. Here, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you all again for coming, and to all the presenters for this wonderful event. Have good news, the shuttle is actually coming over here, so you won't have to go to the parking lot. Yeah, and hang around some more. Thank you.